What's up? My name is Nigel. Here I am again with another daily video for you. So here's something that's going to be a little heavier. Today we're talking about grief. We're talking about grief in the sense of pure, unfiltered, unadulterated sadness. But it helps to see where we can start this topic off. And today, we're going to start off this weird topic, something that's not really touched on in our current society. It begins with our contemporary culture, where we have all been brought up to be infatuated, enticed, charmed with the idea that everyone in this world deserves to be happy. And in this sense, it has given us a false sense of security, so to speak. We assume that the norm for a person is either neutrality or in what we perceive to be joy, which is in fact pleasure. But the true nature of the contemporary culture of today is that it is one that does not reward honesty the way that it used to be. In fact, what it has done to us is that it has purported this sense of narcissism rooted in a self image that has been far, far, far inflated by the concepts of pleasure being mistaken for joy. Well, now, what does this all mean? What this all means is that our contemporary culture has somehow turned the norm into somewhat either a neutral state or a pleasurable state. There is no room for grief. There is no room for sadness. And if you look at it that way, what is your first instinct nowadays in, let's say, a normal society? The first instinct when you see someone grieving is you want to go and help that person because that's hardwired into our primal subconscious. But then again, social conventions have restricted us in such a way that we are no longer capable of empathizing with the person in grief, so to speak. Hence the adage of leave the person alone. Give him some time and space. She needs some time off. She needs some time alone. But in the case of women, women have it better than men in the sense that women tend to be more social creatures. And in this regard, they tend to seek out more of their friends and their family members for support in order to create this tribal sense of community amongst them, their friends, their family, and their loved ones to share a burden that may or may not be too big for them to handle alone. Whereas in the opposite sex, the males, we've been taught that the macho man is not one who feels grief. The macho man that we've become infatuated with is in fact grounded, stoic, unfeeling, and invulnerable and invincible, incapable of any vulnerability of some kind. And it is here where men tend to struggle with even more so than women in the process of absolving grief, of processing it and accepting it. Now, for my guy friends out there, if we truly have become incapable of processing grief, if our society has truly become incapable of accepting grief as it is, and that all mechanisms of us wanting to deal with it are somehow regarded as immoral, unstable, somewhat neurotic to a certain end, then what happens? We all resort to things such as chit chatting, gossiping. You know the whole bunch of them. What happens when a bunch of office people get together? Oh, my day at work was stressful. Shit, man, do you know I hate that guy from the department? Or it goes something along the lines of complaining, ceaseless, endless whining and complaining. Nothing more than purporting the fact of negativity without actually resolving it amongst others. But you know what? Through this repression of our grief, through this continued suppression of our capability to feel sad, to expose our vulnerability and what truly matters to us, what happens is that we become depressed. We become depressed on the inside because we have been keeping so much sadness within us, so much emotion within us that is incapable of being expressed. Yeah, sure. We may express it through complaining, but does complaining get anything done? Does it lead to anything? It gets a bit of it out of your system. And in rare cases, it may be cathartic. But at the same time, this inability for us to process our own grief, other than these external mechanisms, has led to the phenomena that we have today. Where all the sadness is internalized. It has been internalized to such a degree that the only way of coping with it will be through ceaseless streams of pleasure, to numb ourselves from the fact that we have something within us that we do not want to confront, that we somehow are incapable of dealing with whatever's within us, and therefore the only appropriate and safe, or at least the feel-good response, is to somehow just suppress it. Get more pleasure, get so much pleasure that you just drown yourself in it. But the grief doesn't go away. It remains inside your psyche, trapped inside your body in terms of muscle knots, in terms of tension, unresolved, hidden, trapped. When it all gets too much, psychiatrists call it depression. And any attempt of suddenly releasing all of it in one shot is regarded as a psychotic breakdown, a mental breakdown, where the mind is incapable of handling the stress, the grief, the sadness that has been put upon it, that has been trapped inside the psyche. And now, that's where the vicious cycle begins. A vicious cycle of numbing ourselves to the grief within us, an inability to process the grief and the sadness and the frustration trapped within us without external means of some kind. And it boils up into this vicious cycle that purports over and over and over and over again until somehow the best way, or the best feeling option, becomes suicide. Think about it for a second. You know you've reached a critical threshold when you finally realize that your own death is the best feeling option, because you capable of feeling, of processing the grief inside you. And that is the crux of the argument. The paradox of sadness. That in order to transcend our sadness, in order to transcend our depression, it is not through denying the grief and the frustration, but rather through, accepting it and walking through the sadness as you go along and finding out in the process what matters to you, what is it that you care about, and what is it that you love that has been hurt, violated, compromised. And in this sense, I stress my point again about this paradox of grief, which is the only way out of your sadness isn't through denying it. It's not through forcing yourself to numb it, to pretend that you're something else, but rather through acceptance and walking through the ashes of what you once cherished. And if there's one tip that I can give to my friends out there, to my viewers out there, for those of you who are dealing with grief, I urge you to develop this sense of awareness. Start by cultivating that awareness towards the sensations, the feelings in your body. Whenever you're feeling sad or depressed, because with that awareness, you become aware of the sadness as it is. And when you become aware of the grief and the sadness that is within you, within the moment, you're now given a choice. You're given the choice to face it, to open yourself up, to accept the grief into you, to accept it as it is, and let it become a part of you, to let it teach you a lesson, and to let it go. Or you can choose to observe it and not do anything else about it. But the first step to dealing with it is to cultivate an awareness. And from there on, you, my friend, are given the choice on how to process your grief. My name is Nigel. I know this video has been heavy for some of you. And I urge you, give yourself permission to grieve. Even if it's in private, I urge you, give yourself the freedom, if not at least to grieve, to at least be honest with yourself, to be honest about what matters to you, to be honest about what you cannot compromise, to be honest about what you love. And it is through grief that we slowly learn and discover these things.